I would highly encourage everybody to tune in to the Boston Chris podcast. I'm going to be a guest this week, and so looking forward to it. I so appreciate what Chris does on behalf of music, musicians, songwriters. So I don't know how much good information or how much you'll learn from me, but you'll certainly be entertained. He's a great guy, and I'm looking forward to the show.
It's time to jam. It's time to mingle. It's time to see what everyone's drinking.
Hey guys, welcome to another fabulous episode of the Boston Chris podcast. I am your host, Boston Chris, and we are super stoked with an amazing guest this week, the one and only Tony Arata. You guys are not going to believe this conversation, but let me tell you a little bit about Tony. Tony Arata was born in Savannah, Georgia, and grew up on nearby Tybee Island, Georgia. Now, while studying for a journalism degree from Georgia Southern University, he began performing his original songs in local bands. And in 1986, he and his wife Jaymi moved to Nashville, where his unique, soulful style began to get the attention of people like Alan Reynolds and, of course, Garth Brooks. Now, Garth, to date, has recorded 7 of Tony's songs, and The Dance won Song of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards and received both a Country Music Association and a Grammy nomination, as well as a Most Performed Song in Radio and Records magazine. Tony is a member of the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. He has also had #1 records with Here I Am for Patty Loveless, I'm Holding My Own for Leroy Parnell, and Dreaming with My Eyes Wide Open for Clay Walker. Other artists who have recorded his songs include the immortal Dolly Parton, Emmylou Harris, Bonnie Raitt, Trisha Yearwood, Delbert McClinton, Don Williams, Reba McEntire, Susie Boggess, Hal Ketchum, and a countless multitude of others. Tony has also recorded 4 solo albums featuring new songs, covers, and guest appearances by many of Nashville's finest musicians, as well as folks who have recorded his songs, including Garth, Patty, and Leroy Parnell. Guys, we are going to talk about so much that makes Tony Arata tick, and you guys will not believe it here on this show, which also includes 2 live performances from Tony Arata, brought to you by Jim Parker, who allowed us to use these 2 recordings from his YouTube channel. I'm going to put his information in the description below. I also want to thank our sponsors this week, Speakeasy Coffee House in Quitman, Texas, and of course, my partners over there at the beautiful Big Sandy Music Hall. Make sure you guys check them out. Their links are going to be in the description below. But without any further ado, let's get into this amazing conversation with my buddy Tony.
Hey, this is Mark Narmore, and you are tuned in to the Boston Chris podcast.
But yeah, other than that, man, we're just going to chat about your life, your career, your family, your music, your songwriting, etc., and just really try to tell your story today.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with you, Chris. Man, I've met everybody I know through music, so this is most appropriate.
Is that even your wife? Even met your wife?
Yes.
Music?
In a manner of speaking, because she used to come out and see me when I played in college. I used to play in some of these, dive bars, and she'd come out. And we've been together 40 years. We've known each other 50 years.
Yeah.
But we've been married 40.
1984, I was reading. That's insane.
Yes.
Congratulations on 40 years, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Guys,
Thank
we
you.
have the one and only, the songwriting genius, Tony Arata, here on the show. This is not Tony's first appearance on this show either. Tony and I met in, I think, 2019 in Linden, Texas. Do you remember that, when you were playing with Mark Germino and Vince Gill?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh wow, what an incredible show that was.
Yeah.
And sadly we just recently lost
Mark. Yeah.
my dear friend.
And I was trying to get Mark back on the show, because one thing that I took away from that interview was I needed to have more time with all 3 of y'all, because we only had like 15 minutes. And it's so hard to tell somebody's story in 15 minutes, let alone 3 people's stories in 15 minutes. So It's such a blessing to have you back on the show. But we've had the pleasure of a mutual friend, Jim Parker, has allowed us to use a couple of your live performances from a show from several years ago. And the first song we're going to share with our viewers is a song you wrote that was picked up by Patty Loveless called Here I Am. If you could tell us the story behind this song, Tony, that would be amazing.
Sure. We moved to Nashville back in '86, and that was one of the very first songs I wrote. I had it for 7 years before Patty recorded it. She had passed on it actually a couple of times, but that song truly was the result of you move to town and everybody tells you this is how you write a song and this is the only way you write a song. And I was hanging out at these open mic shows at a place called Douglas Corner Cafe. And there was a young man who was very well established, and he kind of came and was like a mentor to a lot of us new arrivals. Very kind, a brilliant writer by the name of Kevin Welch. Yeah. And Kevin has always been, I don't even know if he knows how influential he was to me, but so I watched him play a song. And he broke every rule there was. Whatever they said do, he didn't. Whatever they said don't do, he did. And it was just so refreshing to hear, because they were just Kevin songs. He wasn't trying to write for the radio. He was writing what he wanted to write and what he believed in and what he felt was his best work. And I went home, and the next morning I started working on Here I Am. And sure enough, it met a great deal of resistance because true to just breaking rules that are hard and fast, the chorus doesn't repeat exactly
right
in all three after all three verses. So that was verboten. Nobody, that was like you have to change that. Well, I never did, and I'm so very grateful that it was Patty Loveless who did that song. I came to town when we moved here. She was just getting started. She had a Dallas Frazier classic out called If My Heart Had Windows. And I fell in love with her immediately.
She's amazing.
And she's just truly a brilliant artist. But anyway, she, like I said, she passed on the song several times and then eventually came to a place in her life where I guess that the song spoke to her in a way that she felt like she wanted to record it. And I tell you the truth, Chris, I mean this. When I got a copy of that, I literally rode around till my truck ran out of gas, just listening to that song over and over and over again. I was always such a fan, and it was such an honor for her to cut that song. She also cut another song on that record called Handful of Dust.
Yeah, and which later on went on, Dolly Parton released an incredible version of that song as well. We're definitely going to talk about that today because I want to hear your insight on Dolly and a lot of things. But I got to tell you, as a fan of music, Here I Am is not the song that Tony Arata is known for. Obviously, having written The Dance, but for me, one of the greatest lines in the history of country music and why I love this particular song so much is the line, that burn you just like a brand. Man, that's some powerful stuff, man.
Well, thank you, Chris. And there again, I don't know that anybody who writes a song ever sits down and comes up with any line of note just because they were trying to rhyme it with the line before.
Right.
We're all, every once in a while, if you just got your ears open and your mouth shut, every once in a while, some things just find you. And I'm very grateful that I had a pencil in my hand when that line came through.
Yeah, just
as is the case with most of the, any lines that you write that you're really proud of. I'd like to say, if it was just that simple, well, I'd do it every Thursday, but that's just not the way it works.
Yeah, just an incredible song. I'm so excited to share this with everybody out there. I got to thank Jim Parker so much for allowing us to use this stuff, and I implore you guys to check out Jim Parker's page as well. And we're going to share his information in the description below, just for him allowing us to use this song by the one and only Tony Arata. Y'all check it out.
It's a song called Here I Am. Don't do it, darling. Don't you dare look in there. You said you didn't want to see me, but you've been looking for me everywhere. You know that you're gonna find me if you keep on drinking fast. 'Cause honey, I'm right there waiting on you at the bottom of your glass. And here I am, here I am. I'm in the bourbon and the water that burn you just like a brand. Here I am. It ain't working, my darling, as hard as you may try. You keep hearing those words you told me. You never a man's goodbye. You know that you're just one step from another one being gone. I know I've seen them all unravel. I've been watching you all along. And here I am, here I am. I'm in every lie you're hearing that burn you just like a brand. Here I am, darling, I got over you passing me over a long, long time ago. And my pride was so much stronger when I was younger. Now I would rather have you know that here I am, here I am. I still carry that flame for you, burning me like a brand. Here I am, hey.
All right, so we are back. We got Tony Arata on the show for the second time, and we're going to start off with a little break the ice question. Tony, what are your favorite drinks right now? What have you been drinking?
What a great question. Well, I quit drinking about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm really big into these Heineken Zeros. That's my go-to drink now.
Okay.
And so, I've tried, they've come a long way since O'Doul's, no offense to O'Doul's, but they've just come a long way with the non-alcoholic brand. But you'll love this, though. I ordered one down in Texas. I walked up to the bar and I walked up to the bartender and I said, "You got any non-alcoholic beer?" And he just very matter-of-factly just said, "Why in the hell would we have that?" And that kind of ended the conversation right there. But anyway, so that's my drink of choice these days.
Very nice. Yeah, that's probably not a thing in Texas, to be fair.
Well, it was a ridiculous question,
So, Tony, you are originally born in Savannah, Georgia, grew up on Tybee Island, Georgia. Tell us what it
Yes.
was like growing up for you.
Oh, man. Well, first and foremost, back in the day when I grew up down there, it was Savannah Beach. And they only, in later years, changed the name to Tybee Island. But it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. We moved back to Savannah and moved down to Tybee when I was going into the 11th grade. And I up until that move, all I ever wanted to do was I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to be a baseball player. Well, the first time I stood up in high school and tried to hit a curveball, that pretty much ended that career.
For
So
us
we-
all, not just for you, Tony,
Yes,
for us
yes,
all.
yes. Yeah, so I moved to Tybee, and my brother handed me, and rather than a Louisville Slugger, he handed me another piece of wood. He gave me his old guitar.
Well, thank you for
And
that.
so that summer, I had no friends. We had just moved there. Moving in high school is a tough thing. And so I just remember being left with all my siblings' albums. My sisters and my brother were all moved out and gone by then. And so I had their album collection and a stereo in my bedroom, a little hi-fi, and my brother's old guitar, and began to teach myself how to play the guitar as best as I could. And but what it really did was I had, because I had no other diversion, I sat and read lyrics as the albums played. I would just sit there and read the lyrics included, and so there was an epiphany there at one point, because you hear these great songs by great artists, and then you make the connection. Well, wait a minute, you know, James Taylor's singing the song, but this gal Carole King wrote it, or Aretha Franklin's singing "Respect," but a guy, 100 miles west of you, over in Dawson, Georgia, Otis Redding wrote it. So you make the connection that, well, apparently, if you want to write a song, you can. And so I began to try to write songs.
So you were already interested in the person behind the curtain before you even...
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have that in common then, for sure, because that is definitely, I'm definitely in that vein as well. I'm always interested in the people that made the song rather than who performed it.
Sure.
You know.
And I was so well aware, my heroes have always been lyricists. That have always been. I've got my Mount Rushmore of lyricists, and one of them, obviously, Jimmy Webb was the self-contained songwriter.
Yeah.
He not only wrote the song, he sang the song, or he wrote the music as well. So it was very important to kind of be completely ignorant of the entire process and just kind of make it up as you go along. I had no idea what co-writing was, other than my folks were much older when they had me, and they were from a completely different generation. They were from the Depression era and World War II, and so they had all these classic, these standard albums, and a lot of Johnny Mercer. And then you notice that he all he did was write, well, not all he did, but he wrote the lyric, and would turn to people like Henry Mancini to write the music. That's what I thought co-writing was, where one person brought one thing and one person brought the other. And true to form, all my big heroes are from that school. The guy that signed me up to ASCAP was Hal David. And of course, Hal David and Burt Bacharach wrote everything,
Yeah.
and Hal was just a brilliant lyricist, and Bacharach was one of the most genius piano players ever. So it was just a kind of a putting yourself through school. And then when I moved to Nashville, well, there's skipping over a lot of years, but I managed to graduate from high school. Went to college, and of course, I didn't do anything but play in bands the whole time of there, or in duos.
You went to college for journalism, right?
That's a bit of a stretch. What it was is my father, about year 3, said, "All right, hot shot, what you got the most hours in?" And I said, "Well,
Right.
English and journalism." And he said, "Well, you're a journalist. Now get out." It's like you've wasted enough of the old man's money. So. I wound up with a degree in journalism, but I never, ever learned a single thing, I have to say, in college about journalism. When we moved to Nashville, and I couldn't get anything going songwriting-wise, I went in and lied like a rug and got a job working for a magazine. And when I did that, you don't ever learn anything until you actually do the applied science and, actually get involved in the actual work of it.
Well, let's back up just a bit. When did you know that you wanted to be a songwriter? Like, how young were you, do you think?
I think the first time I played a song for someone, and it was my song, and I got all the way through it, and it was just I never thought about it in terms of I'm going to make my living doing this. It was just the one thing that I truly enjoyed doing, and it brought me a peace and a satisfaction that nothing else did. I think a lot of people move here and they want to be an artist. A lot of people move here, they're really great musicians. I'm neither. The only thing I could bring to the table was writing a song, and true enough, songwriters get to lead a very anonymous and normal life.
Unfortunately,
They don't.
in my opinion. You say normal. Normal is good, but anonymous, not so much. I feel like you guys deserve a lot more credit than y'all get, for sure.
Well, I'm gonna tell you a quick story about. You mentioned "Here I Am." Sometimes that anonymity pays off. I was standing in a 7-Eleven and waiting to pay for something, and there were two women in front of me, and my song "Here I Am" came on the radio, playing in the store. Well, these two gals just got really agitated, and they did not like the fact that in this song, Patty, who they were fans of apparently, they didn't appreciate the fact that she took the scoundrel back after he broke her heart. So they were really mad about that, and I'm just standing there, and I got the church giggles. I was just, because nobody knew the guy that wrote what just made them mad was standing behind them. So sometimes,
can I tell you a story as well, Tony?
what?
Can I tell you a story?
You bet.
Okay, so I have a friend. Her name is Heather Little. She's a phenomenal songwriter, if you haven't heard of her. But she wrote Gunpowder and Lead for Miranda Lambert and a bunch of other songs. Me and Charlie Talking for Miranda. And but anyway, when I met her, she was a custodian at a high school here in East Texas. And so she told us a story when she came on the show that she was in the girls' bathroom cleaning the toilets, and she's cleaning the toilets. A girl comes in to do her makeup, and her ringtone on the phone was Gunpowder and Lead. And the songwriter is literally behind her cleaning the toilets, Tony.
Yes, it's a glamorous life, Chris. It is. Yes, it is. Well, that's all right. She could take pride in the fact that I did that song. That's the best.
Yeah, and lots to talk about here. I love how you're feeding me right into my outline. I have an outline over here to just keep me honest in case I get nervous and can't think of anything. But you talked about going to Nashville to be a musician, or going there to be an artist, or going there to be a songwriter. And you were going there ultimately to be a songwriter, but you were an artist in your own right. You had a deal with MCA, released an album, had a couple of singles that charted. A lot of people would say that's a successful artist right there.
Well, everybody knew I was an artist on MCA, but MCA, they had no idea, But I'll be honest with you, and this is the truth. I mean, that's something you have to really want, and somebody else wanted that for me. I didn't want that, and the whole idea of being thought of like that was just off-putting to me. And I knew I didn't want to do that. I did not want to be involved in the industry from that standpoint. Of course, we let everything die off from any of that success before Jaymi and I actually moved to Nashville. By the time we got there, Jim Glaser had lost his deal, and all that was over with. So, in a way, though, Chris, it was a good thing, because I made the decision that if we were gonna move there, and I was gonna throw myself out into the public, I was gonna start over, not say, hey, I used to be on MCA Records, and hey, I charted on Billboard. I never mentioned any of it. Mm-hmm. I said, if I'm going to make it as a songwriter, I'm going to make it from the ground up, not thinking that you're owed something because you actually, have been on Billboard before. So much so, this is the truth. The first time I went down to audition for the Sunday Night Writer Show at the Bluebird, I was up on stage, and I nervously sang the half song you have to sing, and then I got called back to the board, and who was doing the audition that day? None other than the owner, Amy Curland,
Wow.
and her dear friend, uh, uh, Janice Ian. So
Okay.
that's who I'm seeing. Yeah. So yeah, I was sweating like I had tuberculosis. I was so nervous. It was dreadful, but I made it through it. And Amy looked at me and she held up my album,
Wow.
which she had. And she said, "What are you doing here auditioning for this?" And I said, "Amy, I'm starting over." And she very politely and very rightfully just said, "Fair enough. We'll see you, in 3 weeks for the Sunday night show." And that was the last we mentioned of it. But it's one of those things where now when I talk to people and if anybody wants my advice on something, it's like you either ride all the rides or, it's just not, it's just,
You gotta
it's
take
not
it. You
fair.
gotta take it all as it comes, for sure. I want to give your wife some flowers as well, because you guys met and got together before Nashville and all of that stuff. So she's been through this ride with you all the entire way, essentially. What kind of support did she have for you in this endeavor, and what did that mean to you over the years?
Well, number one, we wouldn't be having this conversation without her. That's bottom line. I literally came home from band practice. We had a little apartment there in Thunderbolt, Georgia, and we had been married 2 years. And I came home from band practice, and my landlord was sitting on the front stoop, and I said, "Well, that's not a good sign." And he said, "No, I just need to see the apartment before y'all vacate." And I went, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, your wife called and gave 30 days notice and said she's moving to Nashville."
Wow.
And I went, "Well, the natural question was, did she mention taking me?" But as it
course.
turns out, she literally called my hand. I think several nights before, she had broached the subject across our little dining room table there. She said, I've thought about things a lot. And she said, "We can be broke anywhere."
Wow.
And she said, "We might as well go be broke in Nashville where maybe somebody might actually hear something." Because I was writing songs furiously when we lived right after we got married. I had finally gotten a handle on just a few elements of songwriting, I thought. And so we moved to town. We came here 30 days later after that conversation with my landlord. We were Nashvillians, and we had no plan or anything. We had enough money saved that we thought we could live for 3 months. And my Jaymi is the brains of the outfit, and she has an MBA. She was immediately able to get a job, so we were able to at least stay around Nashville long enough to hopefully get something going. And so she went to work right away and kept the lights on. And the only thing playing in a band all your life qualifies you to do is either be a child psychologist or lift and tote heavy things. So I got a job working at UPS loading trucks. So I'd get up, get Jaymi off to work, write, and then show up at UPS at I had the 11 to 3 shift, and I'd load trucks, and then I'd get off, come home and shower, and we'd go out to any open mic show that was available. And that was our first 2 or 3 years in Nashville. It was just going out and trying to find some place to stand in front of a microphone and sing a song you had just written.
So what was the plan there? Were you trying to get a publishing deal? Were you trying to be an artist? Like what?
That's a great question. I didn't know what I was doing. I remember a real cold evening in February, right after we had moved there, just staring out the window, going, I don't really know how to get started doing anything, other than the only thing I'd ever done, which was perform. That's it. I'd played in bands my whole life, so I said, well, maybe the path is to go out and just just ply your trade, just sing your songs. Well,
And there was nobody else in Nashville at the time doing that, right? Like nobody.
no, no, there's a very famous scene in one of my favorite books, Grapes of Wrath, and it's where they're at the camp, and he says, "Oh no, I got a job. I got a card here that says I've got a job waiting on me," and the whole camp holds up the same card. You know, it's like, no, they ain't got a job. We all do, and we all don't have a job. So I literally, and I remember it to this day. I wandered into the back of Douglas Corner Cafe and for an open mic show, and that's where I met Garth. He was in the same boat I was in. He had just moved there, and he had absolutely nothing going on either. But went up and introduced myself, and that was, screaming in on 40 years ago now, and we've been friends ever since. So it's been to say that Jaymi was right, it would be an understatement. It's like, well, because we moved to Nashville because of her, I met Garth and I wrote all these songs that we've talked about. I mean, I don't know that I ever would have if we'd have stayed at home. And without Jaymi, I can honestly say this, I would have never had the courage or the wherewithal to have gotten here. So,
As a young songwriter, that validation, even though it's your wife, that validation has to be huge on your craft, right? Like, I mean, I can't imagine.
it was, and I think she knew that I was serious. I wasn't doing this for any other reason except that's just what I do. I mean, I write songs. I mean, I wasn't ever going to set the world on fire doing anything else. I can assure you that. But I know for a fact and I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,001. Whether we were having this conversation or not, or whether anybody knew any of the other songs that I've written, I'd still have the same number of songs. If that's what you do, that's what you do. I mean, because goodness knows if you're only going to judge your career based on how many you've had recorded as opposed to how many you've written, nobody's got a very good batting average.
It's funny you mentioned batting average because I was just going to say, a good hitter in the major leagues is a failure 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I mean this, when I go out and play to this day, I mean, I just, there's a couple of, I'll play a couple of songs that maybe somebody knows, but there's a bunch of them that I play that just because they're my favorites or they mean so much to me. I know what, and it's like, that's the whole reason I wrote them in the first place. Mm-hmm. I didn't consider them a failure if they weren't recorded. I think too often a lot of people approach writing here these days as it's only a valid song if it is recorded. Otherwise, and I've never looked at it that way. That's why I very rarely co-write, because I'm in no hurry to finish something just for the sake of filling up the page and turning something in. And
that's very unusual too, because I know that co-writing is kind of rules the airwaves in Nashville a lot of the time, but that served you extremely well in the side of monetization, because when you have sole credit, you are the guy that gets the check. There are no other checks, so that definitely helped you out, I imagine.
Yeah, and it wasn't done as a matter of fiscal.
Oh yeah, of course not.
No. I'm just saying that I never even thought about it that far. But I do tell people ask me about writing. I say, well, if you're comfortable co-writing, by all means. But I think you can't really be that strong if you can't write a song by yourself. I mean, I don't think you can be that much of a co-writer if you can't finish a song by yourself. I think you have to get to know something about how you write and what you can bring to the table before you can share it with somebody else. And a lot of the co-writing that I do these days is, as I described, in that old school method. I love working with piano players who are, a C chord sounds completely different on
Yeah.
a piano than it does on a guitar. And so I enjoy trying to write a lyric to a melody. And likewise, I enjoy writing a lyric and handing it over and seeing what the musician in the group has to say about it.
So did you ever get a publishing deal?
Oh, I did. I worked with a very prominent publisher here in town, just on a handshake basis for all intents and purposes. One of the greatest of all time. I mean, he's Dennis Morgan, who wrote. Well, I ain't got time to tell you all he's written,
Yeah,
but
the-
he was very well established, and so. The good news is the songs that went through his publishing company, you know, he could his people could make a phone call to anybody and get in and see them. And that was just never my strong suit. I just never took that many meetings. Everybody I've met out playing in some capacity or the other. So, and then eventually, I was really fortunate later on. I got signed to, well, I was working for Bug Music for a while. And that was a real education. It was fascinating. The Begois brothers are just a fascinating entity. And then from there, I got signed to Forerunner Music, which was Alan Reynolds and Jim Rooney,
Yeah.
Terrell Ty, and Mark Miller. And of course, Alan was producer of everybody from Don Williams to Kathy Mattea, Garth Brooks. I mean, he did everybody. But truly, he and Jim, two of the greatest song men ever. I mean, when I say that, I mean they were looking for substance. They were looking for songs. They weren't looking for hits necessarily, because they knew a great song could become a hit. But a hit doesn't necessarily mean it's a great song. It just the two are mutually exclusive sometimes.
And sometimes,
And-
a lot of the time, the marriage between artist and song is, you know, the penultimate
Everything.
reason why a song becomes a hit as well.
Oh, it's everything, yeah.
Yeah.
And through them, so I was there from like '94 to 2000, and then when they sold to Universal, I've just been on my own ever since then, and I've worked forever with a young man by the name of Matt Lindsay, who's always been so loyal and has pitched my songs, and so I still go out and, I mean, I play all the time, or, you know, anywhere that'll have me. I enjoy doing that, and I invariably meet people, and songs get connected that way as well, because they get heard in a different environment. If you're sitting in somebody's office playing them a song, they're honor bound to have to sit there and listen. But if you're doing it in a listening room or in a round somewhere, then people get to hear it on their terms. And if they think it's a good song or they think it's right for somebody, it's their idea. It's not you pitching the song to them. So plus fact, that's the true test, is to play a song out and see what kind of reaction it gets prior to it ever being a hit. I mean, everybody's going to applaud if they recognize a song, or they'll, you know, but it's what happens when they've never heard the song and they like it,
Yeah,
or
getting them
it has a
to
reaction.
invest in a song they've never heard is a huge
Oh, yeah.
talent. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about your process, because you did talk about being kind of gravitating towards lyricists and things, and so I would imagine that you are a lyrics writer first. So what is your process like? Do the lyrics come to you first, and then you fit the melody around the song, or how does it work for you?
Well, this is where not being that versatile on the guitar helps, because, you know, my chord palette is fairly limited. So it's more about writing a lyric to a marginal, maybe sometimes the melody is not necessarily the issue. It's trying to get the lyric started. And so all songs for me start basically with a title. Very few of them have been musically oriented first, where I added lyrics later. but I've always loved having a great or an idea that means something to me, and just literally living with it. And I'm just, like I said, I'm not in that big of a hurry to finish a song. I've always believed that two things. Well, most of them are about 3 minutes long, and most of them contain no more than maybe 12 to 15 lines.
Yeah, yeah.
So every one of them ought to be important. They ought to be more important than just making sure they rhyme and the meter's right. I mean, they've got to say something, and they've got to say something from the top. The one thing journalism taught me, is like you either get the lead right or ain't nobody going to read the rest of the story that you just typed up.
That's right.
So I've got one song in particular that is probably one of my favorite songs that I've ever written. I remember the whole, and it's called "Getting Older," and I literally did writing the song. It took me a year to write the song, and I so enjoyed its company. I so enjoyed having the lines to work on and the words, trying to find the right words and trying to make sure that everything about it was as good as I could do. And it taught me a lot. And it's, it's one of those songs I play, and it invariably gets a good reaction. And people ask who's cut it, and I go, nobody. But it doesn't alter the fact that it means so much to me as a song. It was like so that's my process is basically offline writing. I don't spend an inordinate amount of time walking around with my guitar or sitting over a legal pad with a pen or a pencil.
Well, here's a question for you along those lines. A lot of songwriters have told me over the years that they kind of look at songs as a puzzle. So if you're not in a rush to finish a song, which I think is really interesting, right? Because a lot of people want to be fast and right. But with you, you're not impatient with your craft. If you're walking around everyday life and you find a puzzle piece for a song that you've already started working on, is that something that hits you? And you're just like, oh, there's another line, there's another puzzle piece for that song, and then you write it down and it ends up in it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Getting Older, I thought was done after two. There's two. It's not a song. It's not a story song. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. It's just different vignettes of the same topic. But I thought I was done with two, and then when the idea of what the third one was supposed to be, that was when the real search began. Like you said, oddly enough, with most songs, the old adage is you have to know how the song ends before you can start it.
Okay.
In this case, I knew how it got started. I just didn't know how to end it. And when that hit, the writing of that third verse was a real challenge, but it was also, just like you said, it was a puzzle, trying to make it all fit with all the parameters that had already been established in the other two verses. So I just enjoy, like I said, not being in a hurry, and also the fact that if they're done right, they may not find a voice till after you're gone, and if they're done really right, they may well outlive you long after you're gone. And so I don't know what the rush is to make sure you're done with this song by 4:00.
I love that. I love that so much. Tony, I've seen a lot of interviews with you over the years. I've heard a lot of your talking about your songwriting and stuff. And one of the things I really wanted to touch on is something you said in an interview about writing for yourself versus chasing the radio. I wanted to really flesh this out because that is the dilemma, right? Because, ultimately, in order to make money and a living doing what you love, you have to chase the radio. But chasing the radio can ultimately lead you to never being heard, right?
Well, yeah, and also I've always believed this. we have a finite amount of time here on this earth, and I I just as soon spend it doing something that is brings a certain amount of peace to you, as opposed to only feeling as though you've been validated is if somebody else does it or likes it. I tell people all the time, my favorite song of all time, Chris, all time, and always will be, was written probably, I don't know, it got to be almost 100 years ago, I'm guessing. Or it seems like it has. Maybe that's just how old I am. But it was George and Ira Gershwin wrote a song called "They Can't Take That Away From Me," and that has been my belief, my mantra, my entire songwriting career. Maybe nobody's going to do this. Maybe nobody's going to hear it. Maybe nobody's going to like it. But they can't take away the fact that I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed the process of seeing a song through and having that song mean enough to me to want to go out and play it and want people to hear it, whether anything else comes of it or not. If the only thing that you ever do something for is to have somebody say, "Man, that's great," or "I want to cut that," then it's probably not the right business for you. I think you have to ultimately come at it from the standpoint of, this is who I am and what I do. I told you earlier, I worked for that magazine, and it had nothing to do with music. That magazine that I worked for was a trade publication.
Wow.
It dealt with buses, and yeah. But I met a lot of good people, and I learned a lot of things. I actually learned how a magazine gets put together. I actually learned the stuff I didn't learn in college, and I had some of my greatest successes while I was working for that magazine. I mean, songs got picked up, and I got a lot of songs recorded back in that day. And so I also believe that I'm glad we're having this interview and you're talking to me as a songwriter, and I appreciate that very much. But if I'd still be a songwriter whether you knew any of these songs or not. That's the point.
Yeah.
And so when I worked for a magazine, and I had to wear tie and run around and run a bus rodeo and stuff like that, I didn't think I was any less of a songwriter. I just figured I was hopefully making some contribution to our family, and because Jaymi had carried the weight, and I was hoping I was bringing a little bit more to the table back then, and so I've never thought you have to lead some lifestyle or adopt some persona, or it's just, if you write, that's what you do, and it doesn't matter what else you do.
So I got to tell people out there, I am not a songwriter, never will be. I can barely click a pen in rhythm, but this is probably projection on my part. But I'd love to hear it from your standpoint. I would imagine that two of the biggest compliments as a songwriter would one is that what I want to talk about here, and a second one in a little while. But the first one is, for an artist, whoever it is, doesn't matter, to repeatedly pick up your songs. They get the first cut. They love it so much. Let's call Tony. Oh, well, we need a song for this record. Call Tony. And there's three artists, major artists, with Garth Brooks, Patty Loveless, Leroy Parnell. They've all repeatedly gone back to the Tony Arata well. This has to be a huge compliment to you, right?
Well, of course it is. And those are three really wonderful artists. But what I really appreciated was all three of them didn't call me and go, "Hey, you got anything that sounds like so and so?" Or they knew they weren't going to get the usual from me. And true to form, a lot of songs that Garth cut, I don't know that anybody else would have touched them. I remember what Resistance with a song that Patty did of mine. It was called "Long Stretch of Lonesome."
Oh, man.
There's some real colloquial terms in there that I heard my mama use, and everybody said, "Well, I don't even know what that means." And So they came not looking necessarily for a repeat of what had just happened, like Patty with Here I Am, or Garth with The Dance, or Leroy with Holding My Own. They were looking for, what am I missing? What do you like? Don't pitch me what you think I need to hear for me. Tell me what you like. I want to hear what you like. So I got to play a very, a lot of my songs are quirky, I guess, for lack of a better term. In some capacity, they don't necessarily follow any formula that happens to be popular on the radio at any given time. But they were as real as I could write them. And I think that's what these artists came to look for.
Yeah, because typically, as somebody on the outside, typically when you see that relationship, it's usually because they're a co-writing tandem. You know, like Scotty
Right.
Emmerich with Toby Keith, Buddy Cannon with
Right.
Willie Nelson. This is not that. These songs were, for the most part, written solely by you. And it's not just Garth, Patty, and Leroy. We got Susie Boggess and Jim Glazer.
Right.
They repeatedly go back. You look at Tony Arata's discography, and it's repeated songs over and over. That's just a huge thing, I feel.
Well, you don't have to look any further than how successful how well it worked for people like George Strait.
Yep.
I mean, I don't even know how many Dean Dillon songs he's done, but if you've had success with somebody, it only makes sense to say, "What else you got?" If I were an artist, I think I'd go, "Well, that worked out pretty well. Let's hear some more stuff."
Yeah, quick
But it was
dial
great
is what we used to call it back in the day, right?
What's that now?
Quick dial.
What's that?
Keep that
Yeah.
number
Yep.
on quick dial.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I joke. I've got an old Martin that the only reason I have it is because my dear friend Scott Kinsey was the right-hand man for George Gruen here in town. And usually when an old Martin comes in, they don't even take it out of the case. They just call Vince Gill, because they know he'll be interested in it. But in this case, he stuck it underneath his desk and called Jaymi and said, "You may want to think about this one for Tony for Father's Day," or something like that. So you're right. You go back to the well. The sure calls. But I'm so grateful that when people do go back to the well, you get a chance to play them something that maybe they would have never heard otherwise, because it's completely counter to the one they just did. When I got asked to come to a guitar pull for Patty, she was looking for the follow-up album to When Fallen Angels Fly. I mean, she won CMA Album of the Year, which was huge.
Yep.
So she went back she got some of the writers that had been on that record together and said, "Play me something new." And it was at that first meeting that I got a chance to go do that I got to play Someday I'll Lead the Parade for her. And she took that song immediately and never let go. And it was the last song on that album, Trouble with the Truth. And they cut it expressly, never thinking it was going to be a single or a hit, but just because it meant something to Patty. And she wanted to sing it. Well, if all you're pitching somebody is what you think they want to put on the radio, it's going to limit what you're playing for 'em.
Absolutely will, yeah.
I mean, the reason they're artists is because they're smart enough to know, or savvy enough to know, this would work real well for me. This speaks to me, and it'll be real easy for me to stand in front of a microphone and sing it because I believe it. So that was a chance meeting, and no matter what, the other thing about coming back, I've gotten to know these people as friends,
Right.
far more than just artist, or the old "I knew them when," and it's just it's a completely different relationship. And I said earlier, when we first started out here, the relationships I've made as a result of nothing more than song, nothing more than music, would have been worth it if nothing else had ever come of it. Just for the people I've gotten to meet as a result of these songs and the places I've gotten to go that I would have never seen.
So the second compliment I wanted to talk about is, and we talked about it way earlier, is when a fabulous, iconic, legendary songwriter cuts one of your songs, takes one of your songs, puts it on their album, when they could have very easily just written their own song or chosen one of their own. That's going to be a huge compliment as well. And I'm talking about Garth and Dolly and the Hal Ketchums, and I mean, just great songwriters, you know?
Oh, listen, that's a great point. I have got two brilliant, beautiful women as daughters, and I love them with every breath I take and with all my heart. But I've said this, and they know this for a fact. I've never once been thought of in their eyes as cool. You know, I was dad or the old man or, you know.
Yeah.
But now listen, when I got to call them and tell them that Dolly Parton cut one of their dad's songs, it didn't last but about an hour. But for about an hour, I was cool, you know. And that's like the pinnacle to me. I mean, not only as a songwriter, as an artist, as a human being, you know, Dolly is in rare company. There's nobody like her. And
Yeah, it's Dolly and Willie, right? Like those two, man.
yeah. And sadly, with Chris's passing, we're the numbers now we're down to Dolly and Willie and Brenda Lee, and from that era, and so it's to have just to have heard Dolly sing one of your songs. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm done now. I can go home. And there again, it's not a hit, but it doesn't matter to me. It was like the crowning achievement to me. Like you said very well, Chris, to have an iconic songwriter record one of your songs. You know, Germino, I always talked with him about that. I said, Mark Germino, I said, ain't many people can say Loretta Lynn cut one of their songs. You know what I mean?
Mark can.
And Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
You know, that's not bad company either.
Man.
And so
I'll tell you what, I got goosebumps right now just thinking about Mark Germino and just how much of a storyteller that guy was, man. And
oh my gosh, man! Well, I lost two dear friends this past year. And I've done shows with, you know, I did shows with J.D. Souther, did shows with and dear friend Waylon Holyfield.
Yeah.
And Dave Loggins. But two very close friends, I mean, that I grew up in the bars with and hanging out with was Mark Germino and Malcolm Holcomb. I don't know if you're familiar with Malcolm or not, but you definitely need to check that out. I mean, he was truly one of a kind. And I learned a lot from both of those fellows because they were fearless writers. There was no, well, they'll never sing that on the radio. That never, ever entered their mind. And both were absolute geniuses in their own right.
Yeah, agreed. And I've listened to a lot of Mark Germino over the year. I mean, his own albums are just absolute fire, as the kids say nowadays, man. I'll tell you what, man, you can't.
My biggest thrill is he would call me and he'd say, "We're going for a ride. I'm going to play you the new record." And we'd literally just ride around and listen to his album. And it was a highlight because you felt like you were, you know, privy to hearing something nobody else had heard yet.
Well, you and Mark are a major reason. I'll just tell you a little bit about my background, Tony, before I get back into a couple more questions I have, if you don't mind. I stopped doing the whole interview thing not long after we met in Linden, Texas, and I think it was another month or so that I did it. And then I decided to get back into it 6 years or 5 years later. And a major reason why I wanted to do this again was because of you and Mark, and not really getting to talk to you guys as long as I wanted to the first time. And that interview, that episode is obviously out on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere. And I would get comments almost every month. You know, you need to get Tony and Mark more one-on-one. We'd love to hear more from both of those guys. And that would eat at me over the years, man. It hurt me that I really needed to really flesh those out. And so...
Well, I'm glad if that's the case, then I'm very happy, because that's great. And I'm going to tell you something. Here's how important what you're doing is. Me notwithstanding, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about anybody else you talk to. We're talking about people who are gone now that you'll never talk to again, that you'll never get any more out of. So any bit of chronicling, any bit of capturing that we can do these days is great, because, you know, I mean, to know that no one will ever sit down again with Chris, that's like,
that's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. The reason why I finally decided, because my son was in my ear all the time, Dad, you think about this all the time. You need to get back into this. The thing that happened to Mark, him falling and passing away, just so randomly like that. And you're talking about chronicling. That's why I'm here now, because of that happening to Mark.
And that's wonderful. That's great, because you know, I always marvel at these old documentaries on these bands from back in the day. Well, somebody had to really take a lot of time to get. I mean, I have to walk around with a pad and a pencil and a camera, you know, an actual camera crew to get some of this stuff documented. But it's forever now. And, you know, I just did the thing down at the Country Music Hall of Fame last week. And, you know, if not for somebody cataloging and, you know, curating all that, it goes by the wayside. So I applaud all the people who take the time to chase people down and do interviews with them, and you know, and make sure that it's recorded. Who knows? I mean, your conversation with Mark made you want to get back to doing it, and I'm glad you did. I truly am.
Yeah, it's so sad. I wish we could have gotten Mark and talked to him like we are with you today. And but yeah, the chronicling is important. The stories are important to me, and I know if they're important to me, they have to be important to other people as well. So that's kind of the gist behind it. Let's get back into your songwriting, though. You've been doing this a long, long time, Tony. Long time. Not 100 years long. But I imagine there has to be some kind of evolution, looking back, that you can kind of put your stamp on in your songwriting. Are you able to reflect and see changes in your craft over the years?
Yeah, Cowboy Jack Clement had a thing, you know, about too clever, you know, don't be too clever. I think that everybody approaches songs, you know, early on as the hook, and it's got to, you know, these certain elements that, you know, everybody tells you have to be in a song. I think when I woke up was, I remember the first time I wrote a song and I went, that's my song. I mean, I wasn't writing, like trying to write something for somebody else. And it's one of the few songs I brought to Nashville with me. It was a song called I'm Gone. And the other song that I brought to Nashville with me was called Same Old Story, that, you know, Garth and Tanya wound up cutting. But I mean, it's like you realize that these songs, I always tell writers who are trying to learn the craft or whatever, I just sit down and read great songs. That's the best shot you have of learning how to write one. Why is this lyric so good? I mean, you know, even with no music playing, why is it so good? So I think when I began to realize that you have to write your songs. You can't write somebody else's, and you can't second guess somebody and say, this would be really cool for so and so, and I think this is, this sounds like their last record or whatever. I think when you finally realize, and as I have, these are my songs. This is the way I write, and it's not necessarily right or wrong or better or worse or whatever it is, but it is. You do eventually, if you do it long enough, I think you can pick out. I know who wrote that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation today that you came to Nashville and there were songwriting rules. And now you're still in Nashville. And one thing I can say is, having talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of songwriters over the years, is that there are no rules. There is no right way to writing a song. And so that, to me, seems to be something that has massively changed between the time that you started in Nashville and now. What do you attribute that change to? The no rules versus, a stringent guideline, so to speak, when you first got there.
Well, it's hard to argue with success.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, so if something works that is, counter to the rules, well, suddenly, that rule doesn't matter anymore. One song in particular that comes to mind with me, nobody would record the dance because it didn't have a bridge. So it's like the song's not done. Well, it was done. And I realized it was done every time I tried to write a bridge. It looked like, as I've always described it, is that, you got this perfectly nice house, and then your brother-in-law comes over and y'all drink a bunch of beer and decide to add a room to it.
So Vince Gill would say, why put a bridge? The story's already been told.
That's right. But now, sometimes the rules, you don't do it because it's the rules, it's because you actually have something to say. I think the other song you mentioned, Here I Am, I mean, that bridge is the song.
Yep.
I mean, that bridge kind of it's not just a portion of the song, it's the retelling and the why of the song. So, I think that when things happen, The House That Built Me, take that song, for example. I mean, that was around for 12 years. Nobody, it's like, that's not how, what do you mean the house that built you? That doesn't make any sense. Well, until you break it all down and realize how genius it is. And then suddenly everybody wants a song just like that.
Yep.
And
Alan
I think
Shamlin is crazy, crazy good. Just if you guys don't know the name Alan Shamlin, look that guy up. Oh my gosh.
Alan Shamlin and Tom Douglas,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and show you that, you got to write the best thing you can on that day. The brilliant artist, Miranda Lambert, who made that song famous and made that song, was probably, in roller skates when it was written. I mean, she was, probably 7 or 8 years old. I don't know.
You're probably not wrong, to be fair.
Well, no, and so that Alan Shamlin and Tom Douglas didn't sit down and go, we're going to write a song for Miranda Lambert in the future. It's just they're going to write the best song they can on that day, and they wrote a doozy.
Oh my gosh, did they ever?
But it wasn't there again. There was a rule breaker. Tell me that there's no beer in it. There's no iced tea. There's no trucks. There's no nothing. It's just a great song. And also what it is it's a very simple song. And the genius of any great song is that you already know the story. You've already heard the joke. You know the punchline. But somebody has the wherewithal to tell it to you in a way you've never heard.
It's about feel, right, Tony? It's about the word feel.
Yeah.
Man, just great stories. It's funny, I just had a mutual friend on the show. The reason why I actually called you to check up on you was Bernie Nelson. He's just been on the show.
Oh, Lord.
And
yes.
So I told Bernie, I said, when I get Tony on here, we're gonna talk about you and the escapades of Bernie and Tony back in the day. Now Bernie told me a story.
I can't some of it I can't talk
No,
about
of
now,
course
Chris.
not. He said the same thing as well.
I'm
But
joking.
one of the stories Bernie told me was that he was in the room the first time that Garth Brooks heard the dance. And since we are going to include the dance in this episode, I know people out there, we're almost an hour into this, are going, when are you going to get to the dance? When are you going to get to the dance?
No.
But Bernie was in the room when Garth heard that song for the first time. Tell us about that.
Well, what I remember most about it was the fact that the people who played that night or that afternoon, it was an early show at the Bluebird. The people who played were not only the performers, they were the audience. I mean, there was nobody there. I mean, there was hardly anybody there. And so I know Garth played, I played, Liz Hingber played, who wrote a bunch of stuff for Reba McEntire. She was the waitress there at the Bluebird at the time. And Mark Irwin, who's
going to be on the show soon, hopefully. I've been
Oh,
in contact
good.
with Mark, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and he was the bartender. So it's, who knows? It was just back in those days, like I told you, Chris, it was like you just looked for anywhere you could get in front of a microphone and sing a song you'd written and hope somebody was listening. Because you never know in this town who is listening. So, but yeah, I mean, we back in those days, me and Bernie and a fellow by the name of Scott Miller and a guy a wonderful harmonica player by the name of Jelly Roll Johnson. We would hold court anywhere that would have us, and most often we were at Douglas Corner. We had a thing called the Fiasco that we did every
Fiasco 4 is what Bernie called it, right?
Yeah. And it was utter irreverence. I mean, we had nobody to offend because nobody knew who we were. So it wasn't like you had to be on your P's and Q's and don't say anything bad about this person or that person because that person didn't even know you were alive. So it was a real free form. But back in those days, everybody was writing a ton and couldn't wait to get in front of people and play. And so it was, as I said, it was so irreverent that people would show up. We had a boxing match. We had we built a ring in the middle of Douglas Corner and literally did it like a title fight. We did a mock of
I bet you Heineken Zero wasn't part of all that back in the day, right?
No, no, they were full strength back in those days. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, but it was a great learning experience because what it did was say, all right, you ain't got no hits to play, so just play some good songs because you're playing them for your friends, you're playing them for your peers. No, it was a real education back in those days.
And so
really
Garth
was.
heard the song and essentially said to you, if I ever get a deal, I'm recording that song.
He did, and he, and I think here's the real irony behind this, all of it, Chris, is the fact that you move here with one goal in mind, and that's, gosh, what if somebody will record one of my songs? That's what everybody's dream is. From the day that Garth first heard that at the Bluebird early show to the time he stood on that same stage and sang a showcase for Capitol Records was 3 years.
Wow.
I mean, 3 years in between. So in that period of time, everybody passed on the song. Everybody turned it down. So who could have ever thought that the greatest thing that could ever happen to you as a songwriter would be to be turned down by everybody? But that's exactly my case. I mean, that song wound up with the person who got it from the very first time they heard it and made it their song. And, the cast of players made it a record. The brilliant production of Alan Reynolds, the video production that accompanied it. I mean, a lot of things fell into place, but they only fell into place because the person who sang it really believed in it that much from the very first time they heard it. And thankfully, when he called me, when he got signed and said, "Is that song still available?" I was able to say yes, because nobody else Nobody else wanted to do it.
It's so funny. I don't want to divert from this incredible story, but I just talked to Steve Dorff not too long ago, who's famous for a lot of different things. But he wrote the song "I Cross My Heart." Wrote that song, and every time he tried to fit an artist into that song, he would get the same thing. Nice song, Steve, but not one of your best. And so many people said that to him. And then the marriage between artist and song comes along, just like this one with your story, and boom, we have just these global iconic songs. Just because the right thing happened at the right time, call it kismet, call it fate, whatever you want to call it. That marriage is so important, like we talked about earlier, and this is a great example of that again.
Oh, absolutely. And, I came from an era where, that's exactly what happened, Chris, is that I don't know that, but for, Dionne Warwick, I mean, she was the voice of all those Backrack David songs.
Yep.
I mean, you can't, I mean, some of that stuff, What's It All About, Alfie, and all. I mean, my God, these are genius songs, but they had the right voice. They may not have been the same song with somebody else singing it. I mean, granted, everybody's cut Backrack David songs, but my point is the fact that was the voice. Glenn Campbell was the voice for Jimmy Webb. I mean, it's like. And so much so that when I heard a song called "I Have You," not long after we moved here, I was listening to a guy by the name of Gene Nelson, who I've written songs with since. But he sang "I Have You" that Glenn Campbell had done, and I went, "What's he doing a cover song for?" He didn't write that, and it turned out he did write it. But it's just. Everything that Glenn Campbell sang, you just associated with Jimmy Webb having written it. Yeah. So it's funny.
I don't like the name drop, but man, you reminded me of so many things. I had Leslie Satcher on, and she was talking about Troubadour, and
I love Leslie.
I asked Leslie if she would play a song on the show because she actually came to my house to record the episode, and she said, "Well, do you want me to do the cover song?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Troubadour." I was like, "No, that's not a cover song, Leslie. That's your song." But she looked at it like a cover song, and it was her song. I was like, "No, this is not a cover. George Strait is the one that covered that song, not the other way around."
Right. Well, I remember being downtown when I first heard that song, Troubadour, and
man, powerful stuff.
Oh, she's just one of my all-time favorites. I was going to walk over here. I've got a poster. She and I played the Tybee Post Theater together back in 2017. It was just, I've loved her ever since I first heard her.
Yeah, her and David are phenomenal people. I think my most prized possession is a copy of one of her records. It's a vinyl, and she wrote on it, to Boston Chris, "Thank you for being a friend to music." And man, that's I love it so much. It was like I think one of 100 copies ever made. So like I treasure that so much.
She was smart. She did vinyl and sold every one that she had. Now me, I printed up 2,000 CDs of that song. "Getting Older" was the title track to my last CD. And if you need 10 or 20 of them, let me know. I'll be happy to send them to you because I think I've still got about 1,990 of them.
I would absolutely love that. I will find good homes for them, Tony. I promise.
Nobody has a CD player anymore.
Oh,
I should have done the market research,
Yeah, it's bad to be ahead of the times instead of behind the times, right?
I'm like I told you, I've still got a typewriter. So
absolutely. So anyway, back on track. We're gonna play a live version, courtesy of Jim Parker, here on the show of the one and only Tony Arata doing his global smash. By the way, "The Dance." Y'all check it out.
Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared 'neath the stars above, And for a moment, all the world was right. How could I have known that you'd ever say goodbye? And now I'm glad I didn't know where it all would end and the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Holding you, now I healed everything for a moment. Now wasn't I the king? But if I'd only known how that king would fall, hey, now who's to say? You know I might have changed it all. So now I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end and the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. We talked about global smashes, and I don't get to talk about this very often because there are very few songs out there that have global impact. But The Dance is definitely one of them, and I know you have felt that global impact over the years, hearing people's stories of how this song has impacted their lives and changed the way they are, whether they've used it at a wedding. I know you've heard this over the years, so what is that like as a songwriter to hear the impact that something you created has had on so many people?
Well, well, of course, it's flattering, and it's also very humbling, and I'm glad that it happened early on because it taught me something very, very important. Is that you may well be known for something. You may well be known for a song. So what do you want that to be? I mean, I'm very grateful that the song has meant what it has to so many. My intent was never that. My intent was to write, like I said, I've always said, the best thing you can on any given day. A lot of things happen for that song that if I thought for one fleeting moment that, it was by some grand design, I mean, who wouldn't do that every week? You would do that every week but a lot of things have to line up. So it's, most of all, I'm just grateful, for the people I've met and the opportunities I've had, that would have never presented themselves, without that song.
I can't imagine you ever get tired of hearing the stories, right, Tony?
No, I don't. And, I'm ever amazed at where those words wind up sometimes. I've been in sport, I told you early in the interview, I said all I ever wanted to do was be a baseball player. Mm-hmm. Well, my neighbor called me and said, "Hey man, you're in Sports Illustrated again." And I went, "What do you mean?" And Johnny Bench quoted The Dance in one of his interviews.
Yeah.
Johnny Bench was my father was from Cincinnati, was a huge Johnny Bench fan. So I had some posters made up with lyrics from The Dance, made hat show print. So I called up to Cincinnati, the baseball team, and got with the PR guy and said, I want to get something to Mr. Bench, if you would. And so I wrote a letter about how my father was a Cincinnati kid and loved Johnny Bench like no other. And so I sent the poster up there, and about a week later, my phone rings, and it's Johnny Bench.
Wow.
We had the longest conversation, and none of this can be planned. It just has to happen. So we're talking, and he knew more about music than I do. He told me, this is hilarious. He told me towards the end of the conversation, he said, well, Tony, he said, it must be great. You always knew what you wanted to do, and you did it. And I said, no, Johnny, I said, all I ever wanted to do was be a baseball player, and you did it. And he said, well, that's weird. He said, all I ever wanted to do was be a songwriter. So you can't plan any of that stuff. It just has to come from a very genuine place. It has to just happen honestly and organically. It can't be fabricated.
And that's just proof right there that success can be measured in many different ways.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, the list of characters that I've gotten to meet because of that song it's unreal. I mean, I got to have a conversation with Tony Bennett at the Grammys because of that song. Not because he knew the song per se, but the fact that he was there and had been nominated as well as I had been that year. And but I mean, these are people that you're not going to cross paths with them, but for the serendipitous moments like presenting themselves as a result of the dance and some other songs. But I'll always be grateful for it. I truly will be.
I have a couple of more questions, Tony, if you got a few more minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so I always want to ask somebody with 40 years or a lot of years in songwriting or just in any successful endeavor, what their advice is for people. And so if there's songwriters out there that might be struggling as well, I mean, songwriting is a struggle. What advice would you give them? And you cannot say don't do it. That cannot be your advice.
Yeah. No. I would never tell anybody that. I would say that the most important thing you can do is to learn your craft, is to study your craft. I mean, I don't think that if there's songs that speak to you and mean a lot to you, study them. There's a reason why they speak to you as they do. And great lyrics, great songs read like great songs, and great melodies, you sing the words when you hear the melody. Studying the craft is as important as anything. And also, the greatest advice I ever got in the whole shebang, of course, came from a songwriter. Right after we moved to town, I went to a seminar, and all these people spoke about, this is how you do it, and then a guy would get up and say, no, this is how you do it, and I was getting more and more confused. The person who had the biggest impact on me and made the most sense was a songwriter, a great one by the name of Dave Loggins. Dave walked up to the microphone, and this was his speech in its entirety. Write something you're proud of. And then he sat down. And I will always remember those words because that is the essence.
Wow.
Write something that you're proud to play for somebody. I mean, because you could very well be known for it for the rest of your life.
I was just going to say, because you never know which song might be your legacy.
Yeah. I mean, some songs have a great deal of success. I don't know that necessarily, sometimes the writers that wrote them might not go, please don't make me sing that again. I just can't. I'm glad for the success, but it doesn't mean what it meant then. Yep. That's why writing something you're proud of that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life is probably as good of advice as I ever heard or could give.
I'm going to prove to everybody out there that I have a memory that lasts longer than an hour. I always forget things, Tony. You mentioned at the very beginning of the show something that I want to revisit, and that is your Mount Rushmore of lyricists. You did not mention the entire four. You mentioned one. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of lyricists?
Well, he was from my hometown. He's number one. Johnny Mercer, one of the greatest lyricists of all times. Yip Harburg is on that list. Yip wrote all the music, all the lyric to The Wizard of Oz, which is easily one of the most brilliant soundtracks of all time.
Absolutely.
He wrote other songs. He wrote many other great songs as well. So Johnny, Yip, Jimmy Webb would have to be on that list because he, as I said, he was such a self-contained lyricist, and I loved how his lyrics are unlike anybody else's. They're both highly. Some of them are really philosophical, and some of them are so conversational. And then like I said, one of my heroes of all time, Hal David. I have listened to the songs that he and Backrack, I grew up with them, you know. They were the soundtrack of the 60s and 70s. I mean, they were everywhere from, you know, Do You Know the Way to San Jose to, you know, as I mentioned, What's It All About, Alfie, and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. I mean, my God, it just goes on and on and on. But every one of those lyrics by those four could be a master class for anybody, and not just in and here's the most important thing, not just in the time when they were written. These are immortal,
timeless
words.
Yeah, timeless.
Immortal songs. So that's my Mount Rushmore.
Very nice. Tony Arata on the Boston Chris podcast. What is next for you? What do you got coming up?
I'm actually going to be out in Stephenville, Texas. I'm going to be doing the Keith Sykes Songwriter Festival this coming weekend, and so many of my heroes are going to be playing. I'm just going to have the best seat in the house. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm so sad I heard about this too late, because what a lineup.
Well, yeah, and Rodney Crowell, who he ought to be on some Mount Rushmore.
I think Sean Camp's going to be there too, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a murderer's row is what it is. It's Sean Camp and Richard Lee and Dickie Lee and Sean. Yeah, it's gonna be a heck of a, and I love Keith. Keith is just a pearl of a human being. I love him.
It's a ridiculous lineup. I hope to at least go out to see that maybe next year. But
You bet.
Tony, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I got a friend out there in Texas right now that I didn't have before you reached out to me to do this interview, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Hey, y'all, this is Chris Edwards. Thanks for tuning in to the Boston Chris podcast.